in the long run and in the short run, culture is the only competitive advantage that any human organization has. So there are certain things that will change with scale, but they're not necessarily culture dependent. I remember the early days putting 1 million customers in 5 years as a goal, thinking it was the most absurd, impossible goal. And we got 1 million in 2 years. And then we put 10 million as a goal, 100 million customers, said it's impossible, it's impossible. And here we are.
Hello and welcome to Nu Videocast. My name is Guilherme Lago. I'm the CFO of Nubank, and I'm very pleased to introduce you to Vélez, our founder and CEO. Today, we will be talking about corporate culture and the long-term plans of Nubank. Davi, welcome.
Thank you, Lago. Thank you for inviting me.
So the first question is, look, academic research indicates that corporate culture drives business performance, but culture is very hard to quantify and to measure. So it may be one of the attributes of a company that is most overlooked by all of our external stakeholders. Do you agree on the importance of culture? And how do you describe the culture at Nu?
Yes, I totally agree of the importance of culture. We are big believers that in the long run and in the short run, culture is the only competitive advantage that any human organization has. It could be a country, it could be a sports team, it could be a family. Culture is the group of formal and informal behaviors and beliefs that enables a group of people to work together, collaborate, create, build, and innovate. And so we have been big believers that ultimately, especially in an environment like this one, customers actually consume culture ultimately. It goes beyond customers buying products or customers consuming whatever the company does. Culture brings people, people create products, and products bring customers. So at the end of the day, everything that consumers and bring consumers to a company and everything that allows a company to win is a manifestation of all of those beliefs and all of those different elements that create a strong culture in Nubank.
And how would you define the Nubank culture? What are the main elements of our culture?
So we define our culture based on 5 big elements. The first one is we want customers to love us fanatically. That first element is the why we exist as a company. And it's also our business strategy. When we think about how we win in a market that is extremely competitive, we think that we win in the long run when we make customers love us fanatically. And then we have another 4 elements that then explain how we execute that strategy, which is we're hungry and challenge the status quo, is a value around challenging conventional wisdom, challenging consensus, both consensus externally and internally. Companies that grow and have some success become very entrenched in the way they do things. So we need to become continuously flexible to external challenges, realizing that we don't have all the answers, realizing that problems require humility and being willing to be wrong. And so we actively ask our team members to challenge the outside knowledge, but also the inside way. So that's hungry and challenge status quo. We're owners and not renters. It's a value around how we want to operate as a company. We want to see everybody being part of the same team. We don't like those divisions of the owners and the employees that in a lot of the companies create a certain level of combativeness where it generally is a view of a zero-sum game. If the owners make more money, the employees make less money. This is such a big opportunity that there is opportunity for everybody to win. And we exercise that value of ownership through both actions as well as compensation. Our big part of our compensation is through long-term restricted stock units. We're smart, efficient. We see ourselves fundamentally as a technology company at heart. We have a mandate to be efficient with the resources that we have, the scarce resources. Our resources are our capital, our energy, our time, our share of mind. And so we have to be efficient about how to use those resources so that we can pass that to the end consumer and make consumers love us fanatically. Grow by charging less from consumers, not grow to charge more. And we build a strong and diverse teams. This is a value around we're a company of teams, of strong teams. We're not a company necessarily of big individuals. There's nothing really you can do inside Nubank by being by yourself. You need to be able to collaborate with people. And you also need to embrace diversity of experiences, of point of views. We seek to create an environment where a lot of very different people get together on a table, are able to debate, are able to vehemently disagree, and ultimately there's a meritocracy ideas where the best idea wins. So those are the values of the culture, and I think ultimately those are kind of the basis for the way we make decisions, the way we build products, the way we talk to customers.
And Davi, it's super interesting to see about those 5 elements of Nubank culture, but you often see in many industries, large and small companies displaying very different performance in the long term. And some people argue that culture is the number one reason why performance deviates across similar companies in the long term. Do you think that those 5 elements of our culture are long-term moats that we can defend sustainably?
Absolutely. I mean, I think these 5 values, we basically defined word by word since the very beginning of Nubank. And in 11 years, we have really not needed to change, because these are values that are very philosophical in nature and that explain internally how we can operate. They have nothing to do with, they're not scale dependent. A team of 20 people might have difficulty executing these values. A team of 8,000 people might have it easier if you have clarity. So I think they really very much scale with size. I think that the most important part needs to be ultimately that these values are real, that they drive decision making when we have difficult decisions to make that generally are inconvenient, that we as managers of the company, we go back to these values and we show the teams that these values are for real, because the fastest way to lose those culture is when you say one thing and you do something completely different. Culture is what you do. Culture is not what you say. And so there's got to be a significant integrity between actions and words. And we're very, very careful about making sure that the communications we have with customers, the products we define, the way we talk internally are consistent with those values. I'll give you one specific example. A couple of years ago, we had an analyst that came and said, hey, we're suddenly making more money per customer. Our cohorts were tilting up very fast. And we went and took a look and see what was happening. And it turns out that there had been a bug in our system and we had stopped sending a reminder email to our customers. Since the beginning, being we care about that value, we remind the consumer almost every day to pay on time. We don't want them to revolve unnecessarily. So we remind the consumers, and only the ones that really need to revolve will end up revolving and pay a late fee. So for us, having that consumer value was very easy to know what to do. Not only we had to go back and put that email immediately, but also go beyond and send an email to all our customers and say, apologize for having stopped reminding them to pay on time and reimburse that fee. Now here, some people might ask, well, what are you? Are you an non-for-profit? You're not going to make that much money anymore. How is this consistent with long-term value creation? And our view is they're actually completely consistent in the long run. In the long run, that customer that has just received an email from Nubank apologizing for having done something that they didn't need it to do in reimbursing that money will say, wow, this is a fundamental different experience. And we have just earned a customer for the next 50 years. So that trust is extremely valuable. And in the long run, sending that reminder email might make us make less money in the short term, but will help us have a customer working with us for a longer run. And that's how that value and that strategy are completely consistent with each other and with maximizing for shareholder value in the long run.
That was super interesting, but I was very intrigued when I joined the bank about 5 years ago, when I learned from you that you, Chris, and Ed, the founders of Nubank, were very intentional in defining and contracting the culture of Nubank on the very first day on which Nubank was founded. It's something relatively atypical. Why have you done so?
Yeah, that was one of the key lessons I brought from my previous job at Sequoia, when I got to see some of the best organizations in the world pitching Sequoia, and I actually got to see Sequoia how to operate it, and it was such a different way to operate it that it created a lot of curiosity around, wow, what is really driving the performance of an organization like Sequoia and a lot of the other startups. And there was a saying inside Sequoia that the culture of a team is built by the first 10 and 15 employees in the first 6 to 8 months. those months are very magical because those sort of implicit or explicit ways to operate will get built, and they get built either strategically, proactively, or they will get built reactively and almost without real design. So we had the opportunity to start with a white sheet of paper, design the culture that we wanted to have as a company for the next 50 years. It was a collaborative enterprise where the first 10, 15 employees participated actively and debated what is this culture that we should create. And I often say that a good example of to explain why it's such an important part is I've heard often from some entrepreneurs that say, well, I'm just too busy running my company to worry about culture. When we become a unicorn, then I'll worry about that. And it's almost as saying, I'm too busy to educate my children. By the time they turn 18, I'll worry about that. It's like, it's too late, right? They educated themselves. Somebody educated them for you. And so that's why in the early days or the early years in your family or the early days for a sports team are so critical, because you get to define a lot of those behaviors. And then changing behaviors become extremely hard. Human organizations have a lot of inertia. And so that's why culture transformation is so hard. So anyway, I think that was something that we did very well, that I'm proud that we took very seriously at the beginning. And the benefits of that investment early on keeps paying off for us.
And those were the very 5 cultural values that you've just described to us, right? They haven't changed over the past decade.
They haven't really needed to change. We tweaked a couple of words as we grow, but ultimately they are effectively the same thing.
Great. And David, you always mention that we are on day one. In fact, you often mention to us at Nubank that we are in the first minute of the first half of the game. Now, you've been telling this for us for a decade now, right? So how do you make sure, as we continue to scale throughout the next decade, that we maintain the culture that we have?
I think that vision of being in day one or being in the first minute of the first half consistently is a state of mind. It's a way to think about the business. There are organizations that are in their 3rd or 4th month and they're already in day 2, right? Or there are organizations that are 1 year old and they're already in day 2. The opposite of that is also true. There are organizations that are decades long and they're still in day 1. And day 1 is effectively, I think it's an approach around seeing your success with a lot of humility, actively reminding yourself that there is a lot that you don't know. There is a kind of a Japanese belief that we like a lot. That we said, for the beginner, everything is possible. For the expert, very few is possible. We like to continuously be a beginner, and day 1 is much being about being a beginner. It's like the 5-year-old that sees the world with a lot of curiosity. And we also say that we like to bring people that have a head full of questions, not a full of answers. First minute of the first half is about having an organization that has a lot of questions, not having an organization that have a lot of answers. And unfortunately, when you have some success, suddenly you believe you have all the answers. And so that is the challenge, is as we grow, is reminding ourselves and consistently operate ourselves in a state of mind where we know a few things, but we know that we don't know a lot of stuff, that there is a lot still to discover, and that we'll fail and we continue to reinvent it along the way. But it's ultimately a very humble approach to the reasons why we have some success, but also realizing that there is so much ahead that we want to accomplish as a company that it would be a complete mistake if we were to think we've made it and suddenly start acting very differently.
Super interesting. You've mentioned that we fail from time to time. I was curious to ask you, how do we deal with failure at Nubank?
I think being in the first minute of the first half and having a head full of questions ultimately means that you're going to take a bunch of risks. You're going to make a bunch of things that are not going to play out. Yep. And so that means being very comfortable with taking a lot of small risks, iterating a lot, failing fast a lot. And when you do, it's an approach where first, there is no blame attached. We're not going to go and chase whoever made a mistake. We're going to assume best intentions always. And second, we're going to try to really understand what is the lesson behind this failure. And how do we make sure that we make this mistake only once and not twice? And this ultimately means a learning organization. It's an organization that is learning every day. Every day, we're making some bets. Some are going to play out. Some are not going to play out. When we failed, we learn from that success and we go back the next day being a little bit wiser, knowing a little bit more. And it's really a part of the culture that we have, and really embracing failure. I'll just give you one example. We have a routine at Nubank called Mega Demo, where everybody comes in and demo to the rest of the company the cool features and products that we're launching. We also have one right next to it called Mega Failures, and people openly come and are vulnerable, and also show what are the things that they tried and didn't work out, and what are the failures that we had, and we embrace that, and we applaud people, and we make them.
They are both celebrated, right?
And they're both equally celebrated, because you cannot have one without the other one. If you start castigating the failures, you'll eventually will run out of the successes.
And David, allow me to say, you talk about our long-term strategy. I personally would define Nubank today as playing almost like a 3-stage game. The stage 1 that we have been playing in Brazil is one where we have redefined how financial services is manufactured and distributed in Brazil. Stage 2 will be to export this business model to other geographies, and we have started to do so in Mexico and Colombia. And stage 3 will be to build over everything what we call a consumer platform that will serve our customers with both financial services and non-financial services. So it's really a long-term evolution. How do you see our culture helping or hindering the evolution of our business model?
Yeah, so one of the design decisions that we did at the very beginning was what was going to be the purpose of the company. Why do we exist? And after a lot of conversations and discussion with that early group of 10, 15 people, we concluded that the goal of the company is to fight complexity, to empower people. We decided that the biggest enemy that consumers have is complexity. Specifically, when we saw financial services, it's such a complex environment where there was not many alternatives when we started, very concentrated market where 5 banks own about 80% of all the assets. Consumers were paying over 150 different fees. And so complexity was a way for consumers to ultimately overpay for the products that they had, and we defined that as the core purpose. So going after that core purpose meant cracking banking, is what you're calling that stage 1. And that's what we've been doing for 11 years. I would say we're still in the early days, even on that track 1. That's partly why also we continue to say we're in the first minute. We're just in the very beginning of cracking banking or reinventing banking in Brazil. We have over 53% of the Brazilian adult population as customers, but we have small market shares in all the verticals. And so there is this opportunity to continue growing market share in every vertical. We're looking for that complexity and designing products that are good for consumers. We think that complexity also exists beyond Brazil. This is not a Brazilian specific problem, or maybe even a Latin America specific problem. Complexity is everywhere globally in all sectors. And so that's the beauty of this big core purpose. It's almost an infinite goal. And so we've started that phase 2, going to Mexico and Colombia. As we go into these markets, we find that complexity in slightly different shapes, but generally we think we have a way to solve that complexity on behalf of the consumer. And your phase 3, which is going beyond financial services, is also a way where we are executing that core purpose, where we suddenly start hearing from consumers, Nubank, when are you launching insurance? Nubank, when are you launching a beverage company? Nubank, when are you launching an airlines? Now, we're not going to go do all of that stuff, obviously. We're going to pick our areas. But I think what we hear from the consumer is, help me. I see complexity in all of these different areas. And the moment I started getting service from Nubank, that's the gold standard of services. I expect that type of service in healthcare, in telecom, in insurance, in really everywhere. I get almost used to that level of service, and I cannot accept anything else beyond being in the center of that company. And so that phase 3 is an opportunity for us to go beyond financial services, as we've done with Marketplace, to start helping consumers solve complexity in other areas.
David, you mentioned that the key is to make sure that the culture evolves and reshapes itself and improves, reacting to changes in environment and changes to the cycle of the company. One of the most important milestones of Nubank over the past 10 years was becoming a public company, right? Shares listed, share prices going up and down every day. How do you think that this affected our culture?
I given this question a lot because I get this question a lot asked, and my answer is, I think, surprising for a lot of people. It has changed us very little. And so I've thought a lot about like why is there such a consensus that the moment you go public, everything changes. I see it around a lot of my entrepreneur friends that are running private companies. I need to delay the IPO as much as possible. It will change if you let it change. Nobody's forcing you to change. Yes, there'll be pressure of investors to focus on the short term. There'll be investors that think the right thing for us to do in that email case would be don't add that email. In fact, remove more emails. There'll be investors that will be happy. There'll be investors that will get mad when they hear that we want to make less money in the short term because we're investing in the long run. And so they will not come in. And the investors that will be happy with that will come in and will be part of the team, and there'll be a positive selection. And if you also let your team be obsessed with the stock price, then absolutely everything will change. But if you don't, it won't. So CEOs and founders have in their hands the control around how do you want to be running the company as a public company. And I would say being a public company just forces you to operate at a higher level. It's being in the top leagues. It's being a world-class company. You gotta have a level of operation efficiency much higher, and we embrace the challenge. So overall for us, not only I think the timing of the IPO was probably one of the best decisions we've made as a company. We added almost $3 billion at 3 weeks before the world changed macroeconomically, so allowed us to go into an environment of more challenge, being with a lot of strength. But also, I think I'm proud that we've been able to manage that transition in a way that has improved the culture and not detract from it. So there are certain things that will change with scale, but they're not necessarily culture dependent. And I also, and the other conclusion I think with the question is, the question, are we maintaining our culture as we grow, is very dangerous because it creates a sense that every change is a threat. If your goal is to maintain, any change to that culture will be, you'll take it with a lot of defensiveness. And so we changed that framing. Our goal right now is how are we going to improve our culture as we grow?
And David, look, we've been talking about culture for the past minutes here, but I'm the one who believes that there's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all culture. There's no such a thing as a blueprint for the right culture that you can apply to all companies. What matters the most is the consistency between the culture that you adopt with the business strategy and the business environment in which the company operates. So how do you assess the consistency between our culture and our long-term business goals?
Yeah, so I agree and disagree with you. I agree on the fact that it has to be consistency. And I think for us, as I mentioned, our number one goal is to make customers fanatic. And therefore, we go and build an entire tactical planning, operating plan. We go products that are optimized for that customer experience in the long run. I disagree because I do think that globally there's a transition right now, especially anything around consumer. All consumer businesses, be it in healthcare or transportation, from auto manufacturing to consumer products, anything that touches the consumer will actually have to have as a first principle, make consumers love them fanatically. Because if they don't, in a world of a lot of alternatives, they will disappear. And I think that is a key element. I think that also if you look at great companies like Amazon or Netflix, they tend to have that consumer obsession really at the center. And so I think technology has created an environment where putting the consumer at the center, it is the right culture.
Very good. David, we have just announced that we have surpassed 100 million customers recently, right? So when you look at the next stage of the company, how do you see our culture evolving from now? And what is the relationship between our culture and those 100 million customers that came through our doors?
Yeah, so first, I think it's an incredible number. I remember the early days putting 1 million customers in 5 years as a goal and thinking it was the most absurd, impossible goal we could ever imagine. And we got 1 million in 2 years. And then we put 10 million as a goal and it seemed impossible and we made it. And then 100 million customers and everybody jumped from their chairs when they heard 100 million. And we had 6 million at the time, said it's impossible. And here we are. So that's amazing. And I think we as a company are very proud of being able to create that impact. But going back, first, Unfortunately, those 100 million are still not all fanatical. We have a specific definition of fanatical, and there's still a lot that we can improve for the experience of a lot of those 100 million. And second, the world is much bigger than 100 million. And as I said initially, finding complexity to empower people, that is big enough for us to think bigger and to think about other geographies and other industries, which will mean perhaps several hundred millions of consumers at some point. So excited about what we've done. Never thought we would reach this, we would have this conversation at some point, but also humbled about the amazing opportunity we still have ahead.
Davi, I wanted to thank you. It has been a pleasure to discuss about corporate culture and long-term plans with you. Wanted to also thank all of you for listening to us, and we hope that you enjoyed the talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lago. Thank you, everyone.